Right now I have a workbook where I have multiple salespeople that create sales, and each person has one table on one sheet. And I have one column that says whether the sale is finished or not. I want to create a Power query that will take all of the rows where I have a finished sale and put them into an archived sheet. So I simply move them over here, the information. So first I'm going to open up Power Query and create a blank query where I can grab all the tables from this workbook. So I'll start out by saying excel.currentWorkbook with open close parentheses, and now I get a list of all the tables and named ranges inside of my workbook. And in this step I'm going to make a mistake on purpose, which I will show how to fix. So right now I have the name of the worksheet, which I'm going to change to salesperson. And I'm going to remove the TBL part because that's the naming syntax I used for my tables. So I'll simply replace TBL with nothing. And then I can click here next to table to see a preview of my table. And click the expand button and remove original column name. And I want to grab everything. And then I need to filter, so I only say if the sale has been finished. I also want to change the date column to be a date and the price to be a currency, and do the transformation, so if I needed to do any kind of math, I would be able to. Not that I probably need to, because this is just archiving. And then I'm going to close and load to my archive sheet. And now I get only so the mistake already happened, which is what I was banking on, because I have duplicates in here, which I don't want, because why am I getting duplicates? Every time I refresh, I'm going to get 3 more duplicates. And you can see here, I'm getting them from query 1, which is the name of my query, which we can see up here. So what happens is, in the original step, I made a mistake on purpose, which means that I haven't filtered out the archived table when I grab all the tables in my workbook. So what's happening here is that in the source step, I say Excel current workbook. Everything includes the query where I actually consolidate this information. So I have created a circular reference where my query will grab data from these 3 tables, but also from the query itself. So it's just going to keep incrementing every single time I update it, which is obviously not what I want. And this is easily fixed by just adding a filter to the name column where I just filter out query 1. And now I already fixed that problem. So when I then close and load, it's going to remove them. So the query no longer references itself. This solution doesn't remove these archived rows from the original table, which is something you can do, but that will create some circular references, which is what I'm going to do next. For version 2, I want to have the tables reference themselves, so that whenever you update the query, all of these finalized sales will be removed. So this will be a circular reference where the table references itself and then filters out on the sale finish column. So I'm going to have to do some preparation in the background. So like before, I'm going to start out by making a blank query where I'm going to open up all of the sheets and tables within the workbook. And from here I need to grab each individual table, so anytime you add a new salesperson, you will need to come back and manipulate this. So I'm going to actually make a reference to this query in my salespeople group. So I've just said new group here. I'm going to make a new source and a blank query where I say I'm referencing all salespeople. I'm referencing the all salespeople query, and then from here I'm just going to say I only want the one called TBL Alex, and I'm going to expand that. And now I have all of my rows from that table, and then I'm just going to repeat that process, but doing it to another salesperson. So here in filtered rows, I'm going to say instead of TBL Alex, I will say TBL Casper, and it would help if I could spell. And then it can find TBL Alex. And now what I need to do is these tables are going to have to replace the original tables. So I need to make some adjustments afterwards. So now I've loaded the query versions of this table into the same sheet, which means I now need to go and do all the manipulations. I wanted to filter out all of the finished sales. But now what I also need to change is that instead of this, instead of the Casper query referencing the Casper table, I actually needed to reference this one table. I needed to reference itself, so the query references itself. So this is the original table, TBL Casper, and the query version of that table is just called Casper. So here when I filter rows, it shouldn't be based on TBL Casper. So I'm creating an infinite loop here, and anytime I update it, what's going to happen is Power Query is going to take a copy of the current table, then it's going to apply these steps to it, which means it filters out where the sale is finished, and then it prints it again. So it's just going to make the table smaller than it was. And then I also need to make that change to my archive table, where it needs to reference the correct tables. So now this is all fine, and then I can remove these tables because I don't actually want them, and I can move this one up here. And now if I update it, nothing happens because I haven't added a new sale. So if we add one and say yes, and then data validation is being annoying. And then when we update it, it's just going to delete that row. So one thing that's very important with this method is that you always must update the archive query first before you update the individual queries. So ideally you'd have a macro doing this, because you are going to forget to do this in the correct order. And like I said, I need to make sure that I then go and update the archive, because this will be a little mad now that I can't find the table. Okay, apparently it can. So I actually was very smart when I did this, apparently, because I didn't specifically search for the TBL Alex, TBL Boris, etc. I just removed the ones called query 1, but now I have another table called table archive, which I need to filter out. So I also don't want that. So in my archive query, I just reference these three queries, which is technically a table now. And that step is now pointless because I don't have TBL Alex and so on. And I expand the content and I filter where it's equal to yes. And that's what I mean with you need to make sure that you update the archive query first before you do the salespeople. But every time you update the queries, the originally archived sales will now be deleted. So you'd have to update the archive query, so you get all the finished sales from the salespeople, and then you update the salespeople query to get rid of those rows again. But then you'd need to make a hard-coded copy of the archived table, so it isn't just deleted, because this table would only work for last month if you update the tables every month. So there are a lot of potential errors with this method, which is why I would never want to do this, because it is going to go wrong. You are going to forget to do this in the correct order. And now it didn't copy down the data validation, but that's fine, I can live with that. Yeah, so when I update the archive row now, I will have an archived row, because it can find this row with a sale finished equal to yes. But when I then update the Alex table, it's going to delete that row, which means when I update the archived row, it's going to not be able to find anything. So the order is extremely important, that you always must update the archive first, and then you can update these three all at once to get rid of them, so you have smaller tables in here. And like I said, you would need to make a hard-coded copy, so you could just say right click and say move or copy to a new book and just say create a copy, and then you can save that somewhere. But again, I wouldn't want to do this. I would use the VBA version to do this, which I will make next time. Yeah.